Well, good afternoon. It is Monday afternoon, and we finished our series on the spiritual gifts in First Corinthians 12 yesterday, and I wanted to kind of give a closing couple of thoughts regarding that. And it was a series not out of plan, like long ago planned that, but as we were walking through it, it became compelling to me to want to try to clarify each of those individual gifts, because some of those there's not much information given there, and others there's a lot of mystery or confusion in our contemporary life around those gifts. And so I thought it was beneficial for me and for my family, and I know for those interactions I've had at the church, it's been hopefully a blessing. And so I just wanted to, like I said, just kind of summarize or not or put a cap on that, and then as we move on Wednesday, Lord willing, move on through our study. But I would say one of the foundational things about my Christian life, and then my ministry as well, and the ministry that I have here at the church, is a conviction in the sufficiency of Scripture. That is not a lightly held or kind of tangentially held idea, but it is an utter conviction that, based on Scripture, when Paul tells Timothy in 2 Timothy 3, verses 16 and 17, verse 16, he says that Scripture is inspired. He says, all Scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, so the man of God may be equipped for every good work. And it's verse 17, it speaks of the equipping. The purpose is so that the man of God may be adequate and equipped for every good work. And this is one of those, the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the sufficiency of Scripture. That all things that we've been given in Scripture make us able to do the Christian life, live it and be faithful, and to not kind of waffle around in ambiguity when we walk through things when it comes to our Christian life and honoring the Lord. And so that is a fundamental cornerstone of my Christian theological activity. And so when we're walking through those verses in 1 Corinthians 12, where there's a lot of the miraculous and amazing, wonderful works and gifts of the Spirit that we don't see today, and I say that not in a dismissive way. I say that in just in an evidentiary way. When you look at the way in which the miracles in the times of Jesus and the apostles, but just moving into after the ascension, the miracles, the wonders, the prophetic, the tongues, and those kinds of things that were all just there. They were undeniable in their activity and in their I suppose undeniable in their activity and their presence, particularly when it comes to the miracles. Were undeniable. Those kinds of things were evident in a way that's just not the case, no matter stories and things you may hear secondhand or other kinds of things that may go on. The quality is just not the same. And so in trying to walk through this, my hope was to give our people a better foothold for understanding what was going on here. And really one of the keys that I think is helpful, and this is what I want to do this little short video here for, was a helpful key in understanding these gifts was to see the book of Corinthians in its context in the timeline of the Scriptures. If you don't remember anything else about that, think about that 1 Corinthians was written in about Acts 19 really. It was written in about Acts 19, because Paul says that he wrote the book of 1 Corinthians from Corinth, and he goes from Ephesus, and after he's in Corinth in chapter 18 of Acts, he goes to Ephesus in 19, and says he stays there for a couple of years. And so the activity that is going on and being corrected in 1 Corinthians is in the context of the timing of Acts 18 and 19. And so that's helpful to remember it in all that's going on. This is not something that happened, post the book of Revelation or those kinds of things. You're thinking timing in 70, 80, 90 AD, a longer, farther out there. This is still really soon early into the church, and I think that's a helpful interpretive key to remember this in its context. So then that helps to also explain why things like words of wisdom and words of knowledge are not really given any definition by Paul in 1 Corinthians. They're not really specified elsewhere. There are a lot of guesses and ideas, and some better and some worse. My thought when it comes to these things is these are related to the current need of the church, current meaning in the Corinthian context and in the Acts context of needing wisdom from the Lord that you could now get from Scripture and applying it properly, or knowledge that you would need from the Lord that nowadays you could get from Scripture, but the Scripture hadn't been fully written yet. And so that's where I have come to see those as what they're talking about there, which then fits into, I believe, when Paul talks about the gift of or knowledge in chapter 12 or chapter 13, knowledge there, all knowledge, meaning the gift of knowledge is what I believe at this point in time. Now I'm up to being corrected or being going where the text leads me, so I'm always willing to do that. But that's where it has been. And so that's been huge, because understanding the Scripture, it gives us sufficient information to interpret as well as to then live in our daily lives. And so and the reason that is important is because the issue of whether it's the word of knowledge, word of wisdom, prophecy, or tongues, those things are relevant to the issue of the sufficiency of Scripture. As a matter of fact, when I was going through the prophecy section, I quoted Wayne Grudem, who himself, he believes in modern day prophecy with an asterisk, I guess, without going into all of that. He says that, but if somebody believes that prophecy is the prophecy today must match the Old Testament prescription for what prophecy is, then that would be an attack upon the sufficiency of Scripture. So he says if prophecy today is to be understood in the context of prophecy back in the days of Moses and the prophets and even the apostles, if that's to be understood in that way, then that would call into question the sufficiency of Scripture. And I think he's right there. Now, he disagrees with that, how he understands prophecy, which I dealt with in that message. But the point is, that's a significant issue. And so, in a summarizing kind of way, the reason why is that prophecy, it was the reality of God giving words to the prophet to speak to the people, and this is illustrated really almost in no better place than with Moses in two places in Exodus, in chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. This is God telling Moses how to essentially utilize Aaron. He says this. He says, "Moreover, he shall speak for you to the people, and he will be as a mouth for you, and you will be as God to him. You shall take in your I'll start in verse 15. You are to speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I, even I, will be with your mouth and his mouth, and I will teach you what you are to do. Moreover, he shall speak for you to the people, and he will be as a mouth for you, and you'll be as God to him." This not speaking, obviously, Moses isn't a god, but the idea that that's the relationship he's going to have when it comes to the idea of being a prophet and speaking. And this even comes out again in chapter 7, verse 1, where the Lord said to Moses, "See, I make you as God to Pharaoh, and your brother Aaron shall be your prophet. You shall speak all that I command you, and your brother Aaron shall speak to Pharaoh, that he let the sons of Israel go out of his land." This is the connection of prophecy and this direct revelation of words from the Lord that are not ambiguous, not muddled, not jumbled, but it's clear. So that was that when it comes to prophecy. And so it's important that we... Oh, goodness, I did that. Put my wrong note back there. that we keep that clear in our, I think, biblically in our minds of that category. And if there is to be a category of changing what prophecy is, then that needs to be a compelling positive argument from Scripture, not a trying to, I think, argue for other things that are not clear. So prophecy will be that direct revelation for God. But also, one of the other things that was helpful is the idea that tongues is connected to prophecy. And again, this was made clear, I think, one of those eureka moments, just as I was studying and working through these things. It just was became so much more clear, even in my own mind, reading through Acts chapter 2. And after all this is going on, the men are speaking in the languages of other peoples. The guys are hearing them. And then when Peter gets up in verse 14 of Acts chapter 2, he starts speaking to them. And then he says this in verse 15, "For these men are not drunk as you suppose, for it is only the third hour of the day. But this is what was spoken of through the prophet Joel." And in verses 17 to 18, he says twice that this is prophecy. He says this, "And it shall be in the last days, God says, that I will pour forth my spirit on all mankind, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Even on my bond slaves, both men and women, I will in those days pour forth my spirit, and they shall prophesy." So there's a connection in a categorical sense that tongues is a type of, or in the category of, prophecy. And so it needs to be held in that same way, where these was a direct conduit, direct revelation from the Lord to speak those words. Now, in the case of tongues, it was unique and different from prophecy, like for instance with Moses, or even in chapters 14 when it comes to prophecy, even in the New Testament church. But the point is that it was a form of, or in the category of, prophecy. And so the summary would be this: that if it is true that prophecy, current modern prophecy, God speaking directly to people, giving them words to speak, or giving them information that is not here, it ultimately is an attack upon the sufficiency of Scripture. So I don't believe that God is absent from the world, or that God doesn't heal, or that God can't do miracles, or that God can't do amazing things that we can't explain. I fully believe he can, and he does. But what I don't believe is that the gift of tongues, the gift of prophecy, or the gift of getting revelation, new information from the Lord, speak into someone's life, or other things that are necessary for, again, that person's good, or for your Christian walk, that you get that from the Lord, because that would be, I think, an assault upon what is clear, and that what is clear is the sufficiency of Scripture. So I suppose this little summary is an encouragement in the sufficiency of Scripture. We believe in its infallibility. We believe in its inerrancy. We believe in its inspiration. All those are true, and we must be holding fast to the sufficiency of Scripture. And that is, again, one of the things that is a cornerstone in my personal Christian life and my theology, and in the way in which I do the pastoral ministry here. So may God bless you. I pray that your week is well, and look forward to seeing you Bible study and at the church service.